I speak to you in this moment, not when everything around you has settled, not when the noise has faded and the path ahead is clear, but in this very moment, when your soul feels as though it is standing completely still. You feel suspended, caught between what was and what is yet to come. You feel the ground beneath you shifting, slowly, quietly, like the turning of a tide you did not ask for and did not prepare yourself to face. And yet, even in this stillness, even in this uncertainty, I am here. I have always been here. And it is I who am speaking to you now. There are things you have called stability. There are structures you have built around your life, carefully, deliberately, brick by brick, and you have called them your foundation. You have called them your peace. You have called them your safety. And for a time, they served their purpose. For a time, they held you upright when the world pressed in from every side. But I tell you now, with all the gentleness of a father who sees what you cannot yet see, before me, in the full light of truth, those structures are not what you believe them to be. They are fragile. They are temporary. And they were never built on solid ground. They were built out of fear. Fear of loss. Fear of being left. Fear of facing the emptiness that lies beneath the noise of everything you have kept yourself busy with. You have grown so accustomed to leaning on what is familiar that you can no longer tell the difference between what is true and what is merely comfortable. You have confused endurance with peace. You have mistaken the absence of pain for the presence of rest. You have learned to hold yourself together so tightly, for so long, that the very act of holding on has become second nature to you. You do not even notice anymore how much energy it takes. You do not see how many quiet moments have passed where your heart was not at rest at all, it was only restraining itself. Restraining itself from breaking. Restraining itself from feeling the full weight of what you have been carrying alone. But I who know you, I who formed you before a single word of your story was written, I see it all. I see every layer you have placed over the ache. I see every time you smiled and said you were fine when something deep within you was crying out for something more. I see the version of yourself that you have never shown anyone. The one that wonders, in the quiet of the night, whether this is truly what life is supposed to feel like. Whether there is something more. Whether there is a place, a real place, where your soul does not have to shrink itself simply to survive. And it is because I see all of this that I am calling you. Not calling you to perform. Not calling you to become better or stronger or more disciplined. I am calling you out. Out of the place you have been standing in for far too long. Out of the foundation that has slowly become a prison. Because that place, as familiar as it feels, as much as you have shaped your identity around it, it is no longer where I have ordained for you to remain. As it is written, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. John 14 verse 27. Do you truly understand what this means? Do you understand the depth of what is being said here? The world's version of peace is always conditional. It requires the right circumstances. It requires people to behave a certain way, situations to resolve themselves, problems to disappear, relationships to stop causing pain. The world's peace says, once everything settles, once everything is in order, once you have enough, once you are safe enough, then you can breathe. Then you can rest. Then you can be at peace. But that is not the peace I give. My peace is not a reward at the end of a long fight. My peace is not something you earn through suffering or something you find after enough endurance. My peace is life itself. It is presence. It is the quiet certainty that you are held, truly held, not by your own effort, not by the structures you have constructed, but by the one who created you, who knows you, and who has never for a single moment taken his eyes off of you. Yet so many times, you have chosen otherwise. So many times, you have turned away from that deeper peace and reached instead for what was close and familiar. Not because you are foolish. Not because you are faithless. But because the temporary shelters you built gave you something you desperately needed in a season when you did not know where else to turn. Habits that kept you from being alone in the dark. Attachments that made you feel less invisible. Routines that gave structure to a life that otherwise felt uncertain. Relationships that, however complicated, made you feel that you were not entirely on your own. And I understand why you built them. I do not condemn you for reaching for what felt like safety. I understand every reason, every wound that led to every decision. But those shelters, they have also been keeping you from being free. And I love you too much to let you remain in a house that is too small for who I am forming you to be. I see clearly the nights you lay still, long after sleep should have come, staring into the darkness with no tears left to cry and yet no real joy remaining either. Just a numbness. A flatness. A kind of gray quiet that you have quietly begun to accept as normal. You have called that maturity. You have told yourself that this is what it means to be grown, to feel less, to expect less, to ask for less. But I tell you the truth, that is not maturity. That is the mark of a soul that has learned to endure rather than to live. And there is a deep and important difference between the two. To endure is to survive each day by holding your breath and waiting for it to pass. To live, truly live, is to move through each day from a place of inner fullness, from a foundation that cannot be moved by what is happening around you. That is what I came to give you. Not survival. Not barely making it through. Life. And life abundant. I also see the relationships you are holding on to, not because they bring you life, but because the thought of their absence terrifies you. Deep within you, in a place you rarely allow yourself to look, you know. You know that some of these connections diminish you. You know that in certain rooms, with certain people, you become a smaller version of yourself. You shape your words carefully, you pull back pieces of your heart, you agree when you do not agree, you stay silent when something within you is screaming to speak. Because the fear of their disapproval, the fear of their withdrawal, is greater than your desire to be whole. And there are decisions you make, not because they are right, not because they lead you somewhere true, but simply to keep the surface calm. To avoid the confrontation. To keep everything looking fine. But that calmness, that surface level stillness, it is like the face of frozen water. Still above. Cold and isolating beneath. I am not calling this out to shame you. I am calling it out because I see you, and I love what I see, and I will not allow you to continue building your life on a ground that was never meant to hold you. Think of my people, the children of Israel, standing at the edge of the Red Sea. They had walked out of Egypt, out of 400 years of bondage, and now they stood with the water before them and the sound of Pharaoh's army behind them. And in that moment, fear whispered to them what fear always whispers: go back. Go back to what you know. Go back to the chains, because at least the chains are familiar. At least in slavery you knew what each morning would bring. At least in bondage there were no impossible choices, no unknown seas, no terrifying silences where the next step was not yet clear. And some of them listened to that whisper. Some of them were ready to turn around and walk back into captivity, not because it was good, but because it was known. But I spoke through Moses: do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Exodus 14 verse 13. Stand still. Not paralyzed by fear. Not frozen in confusion. But still, anchored, trusting, eyes fixed not on the impossibility before you but on the one who has never failed you and never will. You are standing at such a threshold right now. Behind you are the old foundations, the familiar, the habitual, the structures that have shaped the last season of your life. Before you is territory that I am opening. And the space between the two can feel like the edge of a sea with no visible path forward. But hear me clearly, I did not lead you out of what was old to abandon you in the space between. I did not call you away from what was familiar simply to leave you disoriented and alone. I am leading you out because I am leading you forward, forward into what is real, into what is true, into the life I have been preparing for you. You are not being led toward emptiness. You are being led toward fullness. The old foundation was a beginning, but it was never the destination. And now, in this moment, with all the gentleness of a father who sees the whole road even when you can only see the next step, I am saying to you: Come. It is time. Not in fear. Not in confusion. Not in the desperate scramble of someone who has lost everything. But in the quiet, steady awareness that the one who created you is the one who is calling you. And where I lead, I also uphold. Where I open the way, I also walk alongside. Not ahead of you where you cannot follow. Not behind you where you cannot see. Beside you. Always beside you. Your soul was not created for endurance. It was created for life. And that life, the true, deep, unshakable life I placed within you, is waiting for you just beyond the place where you have been standing still. Rise. Not in striving. Not in fear. Rise in trust. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. John 14 verse 27. There is a story in the ancient writings that I need you to sit with for a moment. Not merely to hear it as history, not merely to file it away as something that happened to someone else in a distant time and a distant land, but to feel it. To let it settle into the part of you that already knows, somewhere deep beneath all the noise and the numbness, that it is also your story. His name was Abraham. And when I first called him, he was not standing at the edge of greatness. He was not a man who had already proven himself. He was not someone who had been tested and found worthy, who had climbed some spiritual mountain and arrived at a place of readiness. He was simply a man living in his homeland, surrounded by everything he had ever known, his people, his culture, his routines, the familiar faces of those he had grown up with, the roads he had walked since childhood, the language of his world, the soil of the place that had shaped him into who he was. And into that ordinary life, I came to him and said one thing. Go to the land I will show you. Genesis 12 verse 1. That was it. No detailed map. No clear outline of what was ahead. No list of what he would find when he arrived, no promise that the journey would be comfortable, no guarantee that the road would be smooth or that people would understand why he was leaving or that he himself would always understand the reasons. Just go. Leave what you know. Walk toward what you cannot yet see. And trust that the one calling you knows the way, even when you do not. And what did I promise him? Not immediate comfort. Not an easy path. Not the absence of difficulty. I promised him this, I will make you into a great nation. Genesis 12 verse 2. I promised him a future. A purpose. A life that was larger than anything the familiar ground he stood on could ever contain. But that future could only be entered by leaving. The promise could only be received by first releasing the old. The new life I had prepared for him existed on the other side of his willingness to trust me more than he trusted the security of what was known. Now I want you to hear something important, something I need you to understand about the nature of what I am asking of you in this season. Abraham was not asked to leave his homeland because his homeland was evil. He was not leaving behind something that had harmed him or corrupted him. He was not fleeing from a disaster. He was being called forward, not because where he was had no value, but because where he was could no longer contain where I was leading him. The old place was good for a season. But the season had changed. And I was calling him into something greater. This is precisely what is happening in your life right now. You have believed, and perhaps part of you still believes, that holding on to what is familiar is the same as being safe. You have told yourself that if you can just keep things the way they are, if you can just hold the structure together, if you can just maintain the relationships and the routines and the habits you have organized your life around, then nothing terrible can happen. Then you will be protected. Then you will be okay. But I want to show you the difference between two things that can look very similar from the outside, but are entirely different on the inside. There is a difference between security and control. And you have been mistaking one for the other for a very long time. Control says, if I manage everything carefully enough, if I keep all the pieces in their place, if I make sure nobody gets too close and nothing changes too quickly, then I will be safe. Control builds walls and calls them wisdom. Control avoids certain conversations and calls it keeping the peace. Control stays in situations long past their season because the alternative, the unknown, the uncertain, the unmapped, feels more dangerous than the suffocation of what is familiar. But true security, the kind I offer, the kind that does not waver when circumstances shift, the kind that does not shatter when people disappoint you or plans fall apart or the ground beneath you moves, that security has nothing to do with control. It has everything to do with belonging. Knowing whose you are. Knowing that the one who holds all things is the same one who holds you. Knowing that no storm, no transition, no season of not knowing can ever remove you from the hands of the one who formed you and loves you and has prepared a future for you that is far beyond what your fear has allowed you to imagine. I am your refuge and your fortress. Psalm 91 verse 2. Not the structures you have built. Not the relationships you are clinging to out of fear. Not the habits that keep you busy enough to avoid the deeper questions your soul is asking. I am your refuge. And when I am your foundation, nothing that shakes the world around you can shake what is within you. You were not created to live inside structures built from the fear of being abandoned. You were not made to spend your life constructing walls thick enough to keep the pain out. You were created to dwell, truly dwell, in my presence. A place where you do not have to perform. A place where you do not have to have everything figured out. A place where your weakness is not a disqualification but an invitation for my strength to move in ways you have not yet experienced. A place where you do not have to pretend to be whole, because in my presence, in the reality of who I am and what I have done, you already are. But here is what I need you to understand. That place of true belonging, that dwelling in my presence, it cannot be found while you are still gripping the old house with both hands. There is a posture of the soul that makes it impossible to receive what I am offering. And that posture is the clenched fist of fear. The white-knuckled hold on what is familiar. The refusal to release what I have already declared is passing away. Abraham had to leave before he could arrive. The Red Sea had to part before my people could walk through. And in the same way, there is something in your life that must be released before you can step into what I have prepared. Now I want to take you to another story. Because I know what happens when you stand at the edge of the unfamiliar. I know the feeling that rises in your chest when the familiar ground falls away and the next step is not yet clear. I know the way fear speaks in those moments, how loud it becomes, how convincing, how it dresses itself in the language of wisdom and practicality and says, "This is too risky. You are not ready. What if you fall? What if it does not work? What if you step out and there is nothing there to hold you?" And I want to bring you to the edge of a boat, on a dark and stormy sea, and show you what I showed a man named Peter. The disciples were in the boat when the storm came. The waves were rising. The wind was loud and violent and relentless. And they were afraid. Completely, understandably, humanly afraid. And then they saw me walking toward them on the water. Not around the storm. Not waiting for the storm to stop before I came. Walking through it. Present in the very middle of what terrified them. And Peter, impulsive, passionate, deeply human Peter, he called out to me, "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water." Matthew 14 verse 28. And I said one word. Come. That is the same word I am speaking over your life right now. Not when the storm is over. Not when the waves have settled and the sea is glass and the air is calm and stepping out of the boat feels safe. Now. In the middle of the storm. In the middle of the uncertainty. In the middle of the season where nothing feels stable and you cannot see clearly and the familiar ground has fallen away and you are not sure what comes next. Come. And Peter stepped out. And as long as his eyes were fixed on me, he walked. Do you understand what that means? A human being walked on water. Not because he was extraordinary. Not because he had achieved some level of spiritual perfection. But because his gaze was locked on me, and in that locked gaze, the impossible became possible. The laws of the natural world bent to the reality of my presence. But then he felt the wind. He heard the waves. He looked away from me and looked at the storm. And the moment his eyes moved from my face to his circumstances, he began to sink. This is the pattern I want you to recognize in your own life. The moment you fix your gaze on the enormity of what you are leaving, the uncertainty of the unfamiliar, the fear of what might not work, the voice that says this is too much, you are too small, the risk is too great, in that moment, your soul begins to sink. Not because the storm is stronger than you, but because you have shifted your focus from the one who is standing in the storm to the storm itself. I am calling you to step out of the boat. The boat of familiar limitations. The boat of self-protection and controlled outcomes and carefully managed distance. The boat you have been sitting in not because it is where you belong, but because it feels safer than the water. And I am standing in the water. In the middle of everything that frightens you. Steady. Unwavering. Reaching toward you. Not to make you feel the fear more deeply, but to show you that even in the storm, even in the in-between, even in the space between what was and what is not yet, you will not sink. Because I am there. And I will not let you go under. The security I am calling you into is not the security of a calm sea. It is the security of knowing who stands with you in the waves. It is the certainty that the one who spoke the sea into existence is the same one who is walking across it toward you right now, with his hand extended, saying, "Do not be afraid. Come." Abraham stepped out without a full map, and I led him to a promise greater than anything his familiar homeland could have offered him. Peter stepped out onto the water, and for a moment, a breathtaking, history-making moment, he walked on the impossible. And you, standing at this threshold, feeling the pull of the old and the uncertainty of the new, you are being invited into the same kind of story. Not because you are fearless. Not because you have it all together. Not because you are certain. But because I am certain. And I am calling you. The old foundation served its season. But its season is over. And what lies ahead, if you will release your grip and fix your gaze and take one trembling, trusting step forward, is not loss. It is the beginning of the life I always intended for you. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6. I need you to stay with me in this moment. Do not pull back. Do not close yourself off to what I am about to say simply because it touches a place that is already tender. I am not coming to you with accusation or with condemnation. I am coming to you with truth. And truth, when it is spoken from love, is not something that destroys you, it is something that sets you free. There is something happening in your life right now that you have been trying to name. You have been trying to find the right word for it, the right explanation, the framework that would make sense of why things feel the way they feel. Why the ground that once felt solid now feels uncertain beneath your feet. Why the things you once leaned on for comfort no longer seem to offer the same relief. Why relationships that once made you feel you belong now require you to shrink yourself in order to fit inside them. Why praise that once satisfied you now leaves something hollow behind. Why acceptance from others, which once steadied you, now feels insufficient for what your soul is actually hungering for. You have been standing in the middle of all of this, watching the walls of your familiar world tremble, and the question rising in your heart, the one you have not fully allowed yourself to ask out loud, is this: why is this happening? What did I do wrong? Why is everything I built falling apart? And I want to answer that question. Not with distance. Not with theology that stays in your head and never reaches your heart. But with the nearness of a Father who sees your confusion and your fear, and who wants you to understand what is actually happening, because what is happening is not what it looks like. The foundations are shaking. That much is true. You are not imagining it. The trembling is real. The uncertainty is real. The feeling that things you once relied on are no longer able to hold you, that is real. But here is what is not true: the shaking is not punishment. It is not abandonment. It is not evidence that you have been forgotten or that your life is falling apart in some irreversible, catastrophic way. The shaking is an awakening. If the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? Psalm 11 verse 3. This is the very question you are standing inside right now. And the answer is not despair. The answer is not collapse. The answer is this: you look to me. You recognize that I never placed your destiny, your identity, or your future on foundations that could be shaken. And when the shakable things shake, it is not to destroy you, it is to show you clearly what must be released, so that you can be moved from sand to rock. From what is temporary to what is eternal. From the old version of security that was built on fear to the true security that is built on my unchanging presence. I want you to understand something about why this is happening now, in this season of your life. It is not random. It is not arbitrary. It is not because the universe has turned against you or because I have withdrawn my hand. It is because you are growing. And something that sounds so simple, you are growing, carries within it a profound disruption. Because growth, real growth, the kind I work within a soul, cannot happen while that soul remains inside a container that is too small for what it is becoming. Think of a child who has outgrown their room. The room is not a bad room. The room was a perfect room for a season, warm, familiar, the right size for the child they once were. But the child has grown. And now the walls that once felt like protection feel like confinement. The space that once felt like home now feels restricting. Not because something is wrong with the child, but because the child has changed, and the room has not. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. 1 Corinthians 13 verse 11. This is what is happening within you. I have been expanding you, breath by breath, season by season, through every experience you have walked through every difficulty that pressed you and every moment of grace that held you. I have been working within you, quietly and consistently, forming something within your soul that is larger and deeper than the structures you have been living inside. And now those structures can no longer contain what I have been building. And so they tremble. Not because I am angry, but because they are simply no longer wide enough. There are things in your life that you can feel losing their hold over you, and I want you to pay attention to this. I want you to notice it clearly instead of running from it or dismissing it. There are habits that once gave you a sense of safety that are beginning to feel empty. There are relationships that once made you feel seen and belonging that are now requiring you to diminish yourself just to remain inside them. There are patterns of thought, patterns of reaction, patterns of how you move through the world, patterns you built carefully over years to protect yourself, that are beginning to feel like they no longer fit. You have been calling this loss. You have been standing in the middle of these shifting things and feeling grief, and confusion, and a deep unsettledness that you cannot fully name. And the voice of fear has been whispering to you that this is evidence of failure. That you are losing your grip. That you are moving backward. That you are becoming less stable, less together, less okay. But I tell you clearly, this is not loss. This is an opening. This is the beginning of a transition I have been preparing you for. And the discomfort you are feeling is not the feeling of something dying, it is the feeling of something being born. Now I want to bring you to a story. Because I know that truth sometimes needs a face, a name, a life, something you can hold on to and see yourself reflected in. And the story I want to bring you to is the story of Joseph. Joseph was young when I gave him the dream. He was young, and full of life, and the vision I placed within him was enormous, larger than anything he could yet understand or carry. He saw in that dream a picture of who he was called to become, of the authority he would one day walk in, of the lives he would one day protect and provide for. And he held that dream in his heart, young and burning and full of hope. And then everything fell apart. His brothers, who should have been his covering, became the instruments of his undoing. They threw him into a pit. They sold him into slavery. He was taken to a foreign land, stripped of his identity, stripped of his freedom, stripped of everything that had once given him a place in the world. And then, as if that were not enough, he was falsely accused, unjustly imprisoned, and forgotten in a cell by the very person who had promised to remember him. If you had looked at Joseph's life from the outside during those years, you would have seen nothing but ruin. Foundations destroyed. Every support system gone. Every human connection that should have held him had instead failed him. Every door that should have opened had slammed shut. By every natural measure, his story appeared to be a story of collapse. But it was not collapse. It was hidden construction. Because in the pit, I was forming his character. In the slave's house, I was building his discipline. In the prison, I was developing his wisdom, his discernment, his capacity to hold great responsibility without being destroyed by it. Every place that looked like loss from the outside was, from the inside, a place where I was shaping him into someone large enough, deep enough, strong enough, humble enough, to carry what I had promised. The dream I gave him at the beginning was real. It was always real. But the Joseph who received the dream at the beginning was not yet the Joseph who could steward the fulfillment. And so I worked. Quietly. Persistently. Through every painful, disorienting, seemingly purposeless season. I worked. And when the appointed time came, when Joseph stood before Pharaoh and was elevated to the highest seat in the land, he was not the same young man who had dreamed the dream. He was someone who had been through the fire and had not been consumed by it. Someone whose character had been forged in the places of difficulty into something that could hold the weight of great responsibility without being broken by it. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Genesis 50 verse 20. Do you see what this means for your life? What is shaking around you right now is not a sign that you are failing. It is not evidence that you have been abandoned. It is a sign that you are growing. It is a sign that the old level can no longer hold you because I have been expanding you beyond it. It is the signal that the season of the old foundation has completed its work, and the new foundation, the one that cannot be shaken, the one that is built not on fear but on truth, not on the approval of others but on the unchanging reality of who I am and who you are in me, that foundation is being laid. And here is something I need you to hold on to, especially on the days when the shaking feels most violent and the uncertainty feels most overwhelming. The shaking is not permanent. The in-between, this space between the old and the new, this threshold where the old structures are coming down and the new ones are not yet fully visible, it is not where you will remain forever. It is a passage. It is a transition. It is the necessary and purposeful journey between where you were and where I am taking you. Think of what happens when a bone is broken and healed. In the breaking there is pain. Real pain. Undeniable pain. But when the healing happens correctly, the place that was broken becomes stronger than it was before. The fracture becomes the point of greatest density. The place of greatest weakness becomes, through the process of healing, the place of greatest resilience. This is what I am doing in you. I am not breaking you to leave you broken. I am allowing the old structures to give way so that what is rebuilt in their place will be built on me, on truth, on genuine belonging, on a foundation so deep and so solid that when the winds of life come, and they will come, you will not be shaken down to nothing. You will bend, yes. You will feel the pressure, yes. But you will not fall. Because what I build cannot be destroyed by what the world brings against it. There is also something else I want you to notice. As these old structures have been losing their hold on you, something has been happening simultaneously, something subtle, something you may have dismissed or questioned or been afraid of, but something significant nonetheless. You are beginning to be unable to tolerate the things that once caused you to shrink. You are beginning to feel, in certain rooms and certain conversations and certain dynamics, an almost unbearable awareness of how much of yourself you have been leaving at the door just to fit inside them. And I want you to hear this clearly, that is not a problem. That is not you becoming difficult or unstable or ungrateful. That is the light coming in. That is what happens when I begin to restore someone to themselves, when truth starts to touch the places that have been operating in the dark for a long time. As it is written about the man born blind in John 9, when light came to him, darkness could no longer maintain its former shape. When sight was given, The world he had navigated by other means suddenly could be seen for what it truly was. When truth touches you, the things that once felt fine but were not right will begin to feel unbearable. The things that once felt normal but were slowly diminishing you will begin to feel impossible to accept. Not because you are changing in the wrong direction, but because you are being realigned into what is true. You are not losing your mind. You are gaining your life back. The foundations are shaking. But I am not shaking. I was here before the foundations were laid. I will be here long after every temporary structure has come and gone. And as everything that cannot hold you falls away, what will remain, what is already beginning to emerge through every crack, is me. The rock that does not move. The ground that does not give way. The foundation that was always meant to be yours. I am moving you from sand to rock. From what is temporary to what is eternal. Hold on. Trust the process. The shaking is not the end. It is the beginning of something that will never be shaken again. I want you to stop for a moment and breathe. Not the kind of breath you take when you are bracing yourself for something difficult. Not the sharp, shallow breath of someone holding themselves together by sheer willpower. A real breath. The kind that comes when you finally allow your shoulders to drop, when the muscles you have been clenching without realizing it begin to release, when something deep inside you remembers, even if only for a moment, that you do not have to carry all of this alone. Because I need you to hear what I am about to say, not with your defenses raised and your guard up, but with an open heart. And what I am about to say is this: everything that is shaking in your life right now, everything that is trembling, everything that feels uncertain, everything that seems to be slipping out of your grip, it is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to free you. There is a profound and important difference between those two things, and I want you to understand that difference deeply, because it will change the way you experience everything that is happening around you. What is leaving your life is not abandoning you. What is falling away is not a sign of failure or loss or divine punishment. What is being removed is making room. Making room for what I have prepared. Making room for the life I always intended for you, the one that cannot be contained inside the old structures, the one that was always too large and too full and too alive to fit inside the walls you built when fear was the architect. And the peace you have been searching for, that deep, steady, unshakable peace that you have caught glimpses of but never quite been able to hold on to, that peace is not waiting for everything around you to settle. It is not at the end of a resolved situation, a fixed relationship, a completed circumstance. It is not something you will finally arrive at when all the chaos stops and all the questions are answered and all the uncertainty resolves itself into clarity. If that were the kind of peace I offered, then not one human soul throughout all of history would have ever found it, because the world does not stop being uncertain. Circumstances do not stop being complex. Life does not pause to become manageable before allowing you to breathe. The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Philippians 4 verse 7. Do you see what this is saying? The peace I give surpasses understanding. It does not make logical sense by the world's standards. It does not arrive through the resolution of problems or the removal of difficulty. It guards you, it stands watch over the deepest parts of you, in the middle of circumstances that have not yet changed, in the middle of questions that have not yet been answered, in the middle of storms that are still blowing. This is not a peace that is dependent on your circumstances behaving themselves. This is a peace that flows from a presence that never leaves you. And that is the peace I am calling you into right now. But first, I want to be honest with you about something, because you deserve honesty and not just comfort. I want to name what you have actually been doing, not to shame you, but because naming it clearly is the first step towards something better. You have been trying to create peace through control. You have been attempting, for years, perhaps for most of your life, to manufacture a sense of safety by managing everything around you as carefully as possible. By keeping certain people at a certain distance. By monitoring the emotional temperature of every room you walk into. By saying the things that will keep others calm even when those things are not entirely true. By staying in situations long past their season because the alternative, the open, uncontrolled, unmapped alternative, feels more dangerous than the discomfort of what is familiar. You have built walls out of past experiences. Every time you were hurt, you added another layer. Every disappointment became another brick. Every betrayal became another reason to pull back a little more, to trust a little less, to let a little less of yourself be seen by the world around you. And gradually, so gradually that you did not notice it happening, the walls you built to protect you became the very walls that imprisoned you. The fortress you constructed to keep the pain out became the cage that kept you locked in. And the life I placed within you, the deep, genuine, expansive life that I breathed into you when I formed you, that life was never designed to be lived inside those walls. It was never meant to be contained, managed, carefully rationed out in safe and controlled portions so that nothing and no one could ever hurt you again. As it is written, if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. John 8 verse 36. I did not come so that you would continue building defenses. I came to release you from the need to defend yourself at all. Now I want to take you to a moment on a lake, because the truth I am trying to give you is illustrated perfectly in something my disciples experienced one evening on the Sea of Galilee. They were in the boat. The storm came, sudden, violent, overwhelming. Waves crashing against the sides. Wind tearing at everything. The kind of storm that makes even experienced fishermen afraid. And in the midst of it all, I was asleep in the back of the boat. And they came to me in panic. Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Mark 4 verse 38. And I stood and I spoke to the wind and the water. Peace. Be still. Mark 4 verse 39. And the wind ceased. And there was a great calm. But I want you to notice something about that moment. I did not prevent the storm from coming. I did not arrange the circumstances so that they would never have to face something terrifying. I was in the boat with them, present, closer than their fear, and when the moment came, I spoke, and the storm obeyed. Not because storms are the enemy, but because I am the Lord of every storm, and when I speak, even what is wild and violent and seemingly out of control must listen. This is the kind of peace I am inviting you into. Not a peace that comes because there are no more storms, but a peace that remains because you know who is in the boat with you. A peace that holds you steady not because the waves have stopped, but because the one who commands the waves has never left your side. My presence does not always remove the storm immediately. I want you to understand this, because I think you have been waiting for the circumstances to change before you allow yourself to feel at peace. You have been saying to yourself, consciously or unconsciously, that you will rest when the situation resolves. You will breathe when the relationship heals. You will be at peace when the uncertainty clears. But I am telling you that the peace I give does not work that way. My peace does not wait for the storm to stop. My peace walks into the storm. My peace stands in the middle of the chaos and holds your soul steady so that you are not swallowed by it. And I see how weary you have become from trying to keep yourself safe. I see the energy it takes, the constant vigilance, the emotional management, the endless calculation of what is safe to say and what is safer to keep silent, what is safe to want and what is wiser to stop wanting before you are disappointed again. I see all of it. And I want to say to you something that I need you to receive deeply. You were not created for this. This is not the life I designed for you. The life I breathed into you was not meant to be spent in the exhausting labor of keeping everything together through sheer force of will. You were not created to be the one who holds it all together. You were created to be held. In me. By me. Through me. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer. Psalm 18 verse 2. When I am your foundation, you are no longer the one responsible for maintaining your own stability. When I am your refuge, you no longer need to construct fragile shelters out of human approval or controlled outcomes or carefully managed distance. When I am your wall, you do not need to build your own. And all the energy you have been pouring into the exhausting project of protecting yourself, that energy is released. That energy is freed up for something else entirely. For actually living. For actually being present. for actually experiencing the fullness that I always intended your life to carry. Now I want to speak to you about what I am doing in this season, because I want you to understand it not as random chaos but as purposeful work. I am doing something quiet and profound in your life. I am not tearing you down with storms, I am allowing what is not true within your foundation to be revealed. I am shining light into the places that were built in the dark, and everything that was constructed from fear and illusion is becoming visible for what it truly is. And when you feel those tremors, when you feel the uncertainty, when the ground shifts beneath you, when the things you leaned on begin to give way, you have been calling it instability. But I call it truth being unveiled. I call it the gracious and necessary work of a builder who loves what he is building too much to let it stand on a foundation that will eventually fail. Think again of Abraham. When I called him to leave his homeland, I did not hand him a map. I gave him a promise. I will make you into a great nation. Genesis 12 verse 2. I gave him a direction and a word to stand on, but not a step-by-step outline of how it would unfold. And if Abraham had looked at that invitation and said, I cannot move until I understand every detail, until every question is answered, until the entire path is visible from beginning to end, he would never have moved at all. He would have remained in a familiar land, and the promise would have remained unfulfilled, not because it was not real, but because he would not have stepped into it. You are in that same posture right now. I am leading you out of the structures you once relied upon. Not because they had no value. Not because the years you spent inside them were wasted. But because they are no longer sufficient to contain what I am doing within you. You have changed. You have grown. And what once fit now confines. What once protected now restricts. What once gave life now demands that you shrink to remain inside it. Like a potter who takes the clay and reshapes it, not to destroy it, not to discard it, but to form it according to the design he always intended, so I am doing within you. Can I not do with you, Israel, as this potter does? Like clay in the hand of the potter, so are you in my hand. Jeremiah 18 verse 6. You are not being destroyed. You are being reformed. The shape you have held up until now has served its purpose. But there is another shape, a truer shape, a deeper shape, the one I saw when I formed you before you were born, and I am bringing you into it. Not by force. Not by abandonment. But by the steady, faithful, patient work of a craftsman who has never once considered giving up on what he is making. I know there are moments when you feel as though you are losing control. And I want to tell you, that is exactly the point. Not because losing control is comfortable. Not because the feeling of not being in charge of your own outcomes is pleasant. But because the control you have been exercising was never truly keeping you safe. It was only giving you the illusion of safety while simultaneously preventing you from receiving what I actually have for you. True security does not lie in control. It lies in belonging. And when you cease striving to hold everything together by your own strength, you will discover, perhaps for the first time, what it feels like to be held by someone whose strength has no limit, whose faithfulness has no end, and whose love for you will never, under any circumstance, run out. What is changing in your life is not a sign that you are being abandoned. It is a sign that you are being positioned. I have not withdrawn from you. I am drawing you deeper into myself. And as you continue forward, even with trembling steps, even with questions you cannot yet answer, even with the ache of what is passing away, you will no longer need to search for peace in the stillness of your circumstances. You will find it in the certainty of my presence. Unchanging. Unwavering. Never letting go of you for even a single moment. The peace I give is real. It is alive. And it is yours. Not when the storm stops. Right now. In the middle of it. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid. John 14 verse 27. I want you to understand something about the way I work. Because I think there is a picture in your mind, perhaps one you have carried for a long time, of what transformation is supposed to look like. You imagine it arriving with something dramatic. A moment of sudden clarity that rearranges everything at once. A single prayer that lifts the weight completely. A decision that resolves the tension and sets the course and leaves no more room for confusion. You have been looking for a thunderclap. A visible, unmistakable shift that says, this is it. This is the moment everything changed. But I want to show you how I actually work. Because what I am doing within you right now, the real, lasting, unshakable work, it does not announce itself with noise. It does not arrive with spectacle. It does not demand your attention before it begins. It moves quietly, deeply, in the places beneath the surface. In the places where your reactions are formed before you are even aware of them. In the places where your fears take root long before they ever reach your conscious mind. In the very substance of who you are, the part that no human eye can see and no human hand can touch. I do not begin the transformation of your life by rearranging your circumstances. I begin it by renewing what is within you. As I spoke through the prophet Ezekiel, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. Ezekiel 36 verse 26. Do you see what this means? I do not start from the outside and work my way in. I start from the inside and work my way out. I do not first fix the situation and then transform the soul. I first transform the soul, and then, from that renewed foundation, the situations begin to shift into their proper order. This is the sequence I work in. And it is the sequence that makes everything I build within you lasting rather than temporary. Because here is the truth about every attempt you have ever made to change yourself from the outside in, it does not hold. You resolve to respond differently, but the old reaction rises before the resolution does. You decide to stop being afraid of a certain thing, but the fear comes back without asking your permission. You commit to trusting more, worrying less, holding on less tightly, and then life applies pressure, and the grip tightens again before you even noticed it moving. Not because you are weak. Not because your desire for change is not genuine. But because real change, the kind that holds under pressure, the kind that does not revert when the circumstances get hard, that kind of change can only come from within. From the deep places. From the places that only I can reach. And so that is where I am working right now. In the deep places. In the quiet interior of your soul where no one else has access. In the space beneath your thoughts, beneath your habits, beneath the carefully constructed presentation of yourself that you show to the world. I am working there. Slowly. Steadily. Without noise or announcement. But with absolute certainty. And how does this deep, quiet work begin to show itself? Not all at once. Not in a dramatic and unmistakable moment that you can point to and say, there. That is when everything changed. It shows itself in subtle ways. In almost imperceptible shifts. In the small, quiet moments that you might easily overlook if you are not paying attention. You take a breath that is slightly deeper than the breaths you have been taking for years. You notice it for a moment, that small, unexpected space in your chest where something has loosened very slightly, where the compression is just a fraction less than it was before. You do not know what to make of it. You do not know where it came from. But something is different. Something, somewhere deep within you, has shifted by a millimeter, and that millimeter is me. A reaction that once surged through you, the familiar flood of anxiety or anger or the desperate need to fix and control, arrives, and it is slightly softer than before. Not gone. Not eliminated. But softened. As though something inside you has absorbed a portion of its force before it could reach the surface. And you pause for a moment, surprised, because that response did not used to be there. That pause, that softening, that is me. Quietly replacing the old material of your soul's foundation with something new. With something that does not react from the wound, but responds from the solid ground. This is not coincidence. This is not self-generated change. This is not the result of trying harder or willing yourself into a new pattern. This is the gentle, patient, faithful work of a God who is transforming your inner substance from the old foundation of self-protection into a new foundation of peace. And as that inner structure becomes steady, as the ground within you becomes more solid, the outer world around you will no longer be able to collapse you as easily as it once did. Not because your circumstances have changed, but because what you are standing on inside has changed. Now I want to speak to you about something else that is happening within you, something you may have noticed but perhaps dismissed or felt guilty about or misunderstood. There is a growing weariness within you towards certain things. Towards certain conversations that used to occupy you for hours. Towards certain environments that once felt normal but now feel heavy and airless. Towards certain patterns of interaction that once gave you something, a sense of belonging, a distraction from the deeper questions, a way of filling the quiet, but now leave you emptier after them than you were before. You have been interpreting this as a problem. You have told yourself that something is wrong with you. That you are becoming antisocial, or ungrateful, or difficult. That you are pulling away from people and from life in a way that is unhealthy. But I want to reframe this for you, because what you are experiencing is not withdrawal. It is discernment being born. It is the quiet but undeniable awakening of a soul that is being drawn back to what is real, back to what is true, back to the only place where it has ever been able to truly rest. I am drawing you. And the drawing takes the form of a growing inability to be satisfied by what used to satisfy. A growing inability to find rest in the places that used to feel like rest. A growing restlessness within the environments and relationships and habits that once kept you occupied but never truly filled you. As it is written, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11 verse 28. That weariness you are feeling is not failure. It is not a spiritual problem to be solved. It is an invitation. It is the holy discomfort of a soul that has outgrown the places it has been taking shelter in, and is being pulled, gently, persistently, with a pull that cannot ultimately be resisted, toward the only place that can actually hold it. I am not drawing you back to control you. I am not pulling you toward myself so that I can add more requirements to your life, more pressure, more performance. I am drawing you back so that you no longer have to sustain yourself by your own strength. So that you can finally stop bracing. Stop straining. Stop holding your breath and waiting to see whether this is the moment everything falls apart. In me, you do not have to strive. You only need to remain. And as you remain, I do the rest. Now I want to tell you something about who you are becoming in this process. Because I think you have been watching the person you used to be slowly changing, and the change feels disorienting because you do not yet have a clear picture of what you are becoming. You only know that you are no longer entirely the same person you were. The old version of you, the one that fit neatly into certain spaces, the one that knew exactly how to manage every situation to keep things smooth, the one that had learned to survive through endurance and control and carefully manage distance, that version of you no longer fits as comfortably as it once did. And that can feel like loss. When the familiar self begins to shift, there is grief in it. Even when what you are shifting away from was not fully serving you, there is still the grief of the familiar. There is still the unsettledness of no longer being entirely sure who you are in the space between the old and the new. But hear me in this. You are not losing yourself. You are being brought back to yourself. The self that is emerging through this process, the one that is quieter, more still, less reactive, less defined by what others think and more anchored in what is true, that is not a lesser version of you. That is a truer version of you. That is the version I saw when I formed you. The one that existed before the fear, before the walls, before the years of learning to make yourself smaller so that you could fit into spaces that were never really designed to hold you. As Paul wrote, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away, behold, all things have become new. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 17. This newness is not a title. It is not a label you apply to yourself as a kind of spiritual aspiration. It is a living reality that changes the way you breathe, the way you move through the world, the way you process what happens to you, the way you receive love and give it, the way you respond to difficulty, the way you hold yourself in the quiet of the night when no one else is watching. It is a transformation that starts so deep within you that you barely notice it at first, and then one day you look up and realize that the person standing in your skin is different, not because you willed yourself into being different, but because something was changed within you at a level that you did not manage and could not have manufactured by your own effort. So when you feel that you are no longer the same, do not be afraid. When you find that you no longer fit into what once defined you, do not be troubled. When you sense a desire within you to grow still rather than continue striving, do not resist it. This is not something going wrong. This is something going right. Perhaps for the first time in a very long time, something is actually going right. You are being rebuilt. Layer by layer. Breath by breath. From the inside out. And the foundation being laid within you is not made of fear or self-protection or the desperate need to belong to the approval of others. It is made of truth. It is made of belonging to me. It is made of the unshakable reality that you are known, you are held, you are loved, not because of what you do, not because of how well you perform, not because you have kept all the pieces together, but because you are mine. And that is a foundation that no storm can shake and no season can remove. As each layer of the old falls away, as each piece of what was never truly yours releases its grip, you will not find emptiness beneath it. You will find me. Already there. Already present. Already working. Already building the life within you that was always meant to be yours. The transformation has already begun. You may not see it fully yet. You may still be standing in the in-between, still feeling more of the dismantling than the rebuilding. But I want you to know, with the certainty of one who sees the beginning and the end at once, that the work is happening. It is real. It is certain. And it is carrying you, step by quiet step, breath by gentle breath, into the life I ordained for you before you ever drew your first breath. You are exactly where I am placing you. And where I place what I love, I also keep. Behold, I am making all things new. Revelation 21 verse 5. There is a shift that I am bringing about within you that is unlike any change you have ever tried to produce by your own effort. It is not a shift in your circumstances. It is not a shift in the people around you or the situations you find yourself in or the external conditions of your daily life. It is a shift at a far deeper level, at the level of how you exist inside all of those things. And it begins with something so subtle that you might almost miss it if you are not paying attention. Something small enough to dismiss as coincidence, yet significant enough that when you finally recognize it for what it is, it will change everything about how you understand this season of your life. You will begin to notice that your heart is at rest, not after the storm has passed, not when the problem has been resolved and the tension has released and every unanswered question has finally received its answer, but in the middle. In the unfinished, unresolved, still uncertain middle. And that rest in the middle, that quiet, unexpected settledness in a space that has not yet been made tidy and safe and clear, that is not something you manufactured. That is me. That is the first visible sign of the new foundation taking hold within you. As it is written, you will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are stayed on you. Isaiah 26 verse 3. Perfect peace. Not partial peace. Not the kind of peace that exists only when everything lines up correctly. Not the fragile calm that shatters the moment a new difficulty arises or a familiar anxiety returns. Perfect peace, a wholeness, a steadiness, a deep interior quiet, kept. Actively kept. Not something you achieve through discipline or willpower or spiritual performance. Something I keep for you. Something I sustain within you. Something that flows not from your ability to manage your life but from your willingness to keep your mind, your attention, your trust, your gaze, stayed upon me. And here is what I want you to understand about what this feels like from the inside. Before this shift began in you, your peace was always conditional. You needed the world to behave itself before you could breathe. You needed every story to reach its resolution, every relationship to be free of tension, every uncertainty to be replaced by clarity before you could allow yourself to rest. You lived in a constant state of waiting for the conditions to finally align in a way that would give you permission to stop bracing yourself, to stop holding everything together, to exhale and feel genuinely okay. But I am doing something new within you now. I am causing your heart to be at rest even while everything around you remains unfinished. Even while the questions are still open. Even while the relationship is still complicated. Even while the path ahead is still unclear. I am placing within you a peace that does not wait for circumstances to cooperate before it arrives. I am forming within you a stability that exists not because everything has settled but because you are settled, in me, by me, through me. And this is the first sign that something profound has shifted. Not the resolution of your problems, but the transformation of your relationship to your problems. You are no longer living purely in reaction. You are beginning, for the first time, to live in presence. Think of Paul and Silas in the prison at Philippi. They were not in comfortable circumstances. They were not surrounded by evidence that everything was going to work out. They were in chains, in darkness, in a place that by every natural measure was a place of defeat and despair. And yet, in that place, in those chains, in that darkness, they prayed. They sang. Not because their situation had changed. Not because they had received a promise that they would be released by morning. But because the inner space they inhabited no longer belonged to their circumstances. It belonged to another reality entirely. A reality defined not by what was pressing in on them from the outside, but by who was present with them on the inside. About midnight Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Acts 16 verse 25. The other prisoners were listening. Do you notice that? Even in the darkness, even in the chains, the reality they carried was so different from their surroundings that it drew the attention of everyone around them. Not because they were performing. Not because they were pretending the difficulty wasn't real. But because what existed within them was genuinely of a different order than what existed around them. This is what I am forming within you. A life where your circumstances no longer determine the state of your soul. A life where you no longer need every external thing to align before the internal thing can be steady. I am teaching you to let me become your axis, the fixed and unmoving center around which everything else turns. Not the outcomes of your decisions. Not the approval of people you love. Not the resolution of the difficulties you are facing. Me. Only me. The one thing that does not change, does not shift, does not fail, does not leave. And as that axis becomes established within you, something else begins to develop. A clarity that you have not had access to before. A quality of discernment that does not depend on lengthy deliberation or external confirmation. You begin to know things, not through anxious analysis, not through running the calculations over and over until exhaustion forces a conclusion, but through a quiet and immediate recognition. A deep interior sense of what is right, what is true, what is from me and what is not. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Psalm 119 verse 105. That lamp does not illuminate the entire road at once. It does not give you the full picture from beginning to end. But it gives you enough light for the step you are on. And as you learn to trust that light, as you stop insisting on seeing everything before you move, you will find that the next step is always illuminated at the right moment. Not a moment too early to require no faith. Not a moment too late to leave you stranded. At precisely the right moment. Because I am the one holding the lamp, and my timing has never once been wrong. Now I also want to speak to you about the process of how I build the new dwelling within you, because I want you to understand it clearly so that you do not become discouraged on the days when the work seems invisible. Because there will be such days. Days when you wake up and you cannot feel the progress. Days when the old reactions return with their familiar force and you wonder whether anything has actually changed. Days when the new foundation seems no more real than it did before. On those days, I want you to remember this: I am not absent from the work simply because you cannot see its movement. There is not a single day, not one, in which I step away from what I am building within you. Just as a wise builder does not abandon a house midway through its construction, I do not abandon the soul I am restoring. Every day, whether you perceive it or not, the work continues. Sometimes I lay new foundations. Sometimes I remove old layers that are no longer needed. And sometimes, and this is important, I simply remain still. I allow a quiet season. A season where the most important thing happening is not visible movement but the learning of a new kind of attentiveness. The learning of how to recognize my presence even when there is no dramatic sign, no emotional experience, no undeniable feeling of something happening. Because I do not always come with wind and fire and earthquake. As I came to Elijah in the cave, not in the great and powerful wind that tore the mountains apart, not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but in a still small voice. A gentle whisper. 1 Kings 19 verse 12. Sometimes the deepest work I do is done in that whisper. In the quiet. In the unhurried, unspectacular, but absolutely certain presence of one who is always there. And as you learn to recognize me in the quiet, as you develop the capacity to hear the whisper rather than needing the earthquake, something else begins to shift in your daily life. You begin to find yourself no longer wanting to engage in the battles that once consumed you. The arguments that once felt urgent lose their pull. The dramas that once drew you in no longer find a point of attachment within you. The noise that once seemed necessary, the busyness, the constant stimulation, the filling of every silence with something, begins to feel unnecessary. Even burdensome. This is not weakness. This is not disconnection. This is the shifting of your center. I am placing within you a new covering, the covering of genuine peace. Not the peace that avoids difficult things. Not the peace that pretends the hard things are not hard. But the peace that rises above them. The peace that holds steady not because the difficulty has disappeared but because the one who walks through every difficulty with you has become more real to you than the difficulty itself. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. John 14 verse 27. And when you begin to feel a quiet warmth enveloping your heart, in moments that would once have felt empty, in spaces that would once have felt too quiet, in the ordinary hours of ordinary days that once felt like they lacked enough to hold your attention, that warmth is the clearest sign that the new dwelling is nearing completion. Not because everything in your life has been resolved. Not because there are no more questions and no more challenges and no more difficult days ahead. But because I am drawing near within every part of you that is being rebuilt. My presence is filling the spaces that are being cleared. My warmth is inhabiting the places where the old material has been removed and the new foundation is being laid. And in that presence, in that filling, you will come to understand something that you could not have understood before. That I am not only the one who builds the dwelling. I am the dwelling itself. I am the foundation it stands on. I am the walls that surround it. I am the covering that protects it. I am the very breath of life that moves within it. You are not living in a house I built for you and then stepped back from. You are living within me. And within me, you are sustained not by your own effort but by my very nature, which is love, which is faithfulness, which is peace that surpasses every understanding and every circumstance. You are no longer one who searches for a place to belong. You have become one who dwells. Not temporary shelter anymore. Not a patchwork of borrowed security and fragile dependence. Not the exhausting project of holding yourself together through willpower and control and carefully managed distance. But a real and living and lasting dwelling, within a reality that I myself sustain. Within a presence that nothing outside of you can shake because it does not exist outside of you. It exists within you. I am within you. And what I establish from the inside cannot be dismantled from the outside. Nothing around you, no storm, no season of difficulty, no relationship that disappoints, no circumstance that destabilizes, can shake what I am establishing within you. Because I am the one establishing it. And I do not build what I am unwilling to sustain. I do not begin what I am unable to complete. I do not call you into a dwelling and then abandon you to maintain it by yourself. You are held. You are sustained. You are home. God is within her, she will not fall. Psalm 46 verse 5. I want to speak to you now about something that is already in motion within you, something that has been quietly underway for longer than you may realize. And I want to give it a name, because I have found that when you can name what is happening, when you can see the shape of it clearly, the disorientation begins to lift and what once felt like confusion begins to feel like direction. What is happening within you is elevation. Not the elevation the world talks about, not the accumulation of achievements, the climbing of visible ladders, the acquisition of recognition or position or material evidence that your life is moving upward. Not the kind of elevation that can be measured by what is happening around you. The kind I am speaking of is invisible to the eye but undeniable to the soul. It is an elevation of your inner life. A lifting of the ground on which you stand within yourself. A rising of the foundation of who you are from the level of fear and reaction and wound-driven response to the level of presence, truth, and genuine peace. And I want you to understand something important about how this elevation moves. Because I think you have been waiting for the moment it arrives all at once, the instant transformation, the singular experience after which nothing is the same. And I want to gently correct that expectation. Inner elevation is not a sudden burst. It is not a single dramatic moment that you can point to on a calendar and say, before this day I was one way, and after this day I was entirely different. It is a new realm of living into which I am leading you step by step. Quietly. Consistently. Sometimes almost imperceptibly. As it is written, walk worthy of the calling you have received. Ephesians 4 verse 1. That walk, the walk of someone being elevated within their inner life, is not loud. It does not announce itself with noise. Yet it reshapes the entirety of who you are from the inside out. And over time, over the accumulation of these quiet, steady, seemingly small steps, you will look up one day and realize that the person walking in your skin is genuinely different. Not because you willed yourself into being different, but because you were led into a different realm of living, one step at a time, by one who knows the way. Now let me tell you what this elevation actually feels like from the inside. Because I want you to recognize it when it comes, and not dismiss it as something ordinary or coincidental. The first thing you will notice is the beginning of a freedom that you have not felt before. Not the freedom of having no responsibilities or no difficulties or no hard relationships to navigate. Not the freedom that the world promises, the freedom of having enough money, enough success, enough recognition to finally feel that you can breathe. Those things do not produce the freedom I am speaking of. As it is written, if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. John 8 verse 36. This freedom is not the absence of external chains. It is the release from all that has been binding you from within. The freedom from the compulsive need to be approved of before you can feel that you have worth. The freedom from the desperate grip of fear, the fear of abandonment, the fear of failure, the fear of being truly seen and found inadequate. The freedom from the tyranny of old wounds that have been writing the script of your reactions for years, pulling you into the same painful patterns over and over without your permission, without your conscious choosing. And as this freedom begins to form, you will notice something happening in the spaces within you that have been contracted for so long. There are places within your heart, places of anxiety, places of old fear, places where you have been braced and clenched and held tightly closed, and those places will begin to open. Just slightly at first. And then more. As though walls that were built to keep the pain out are no longer needed in quite the same way. As though the chest that has been tight for years is slowly, quietly beginning to expand. Old triggers will still come. I want to be honest with you about that. The things that once caused you to contract, to panic, to retreat into the old defensive postures, they will not disappear overnight. But here is what will change, your relationship to them. The trigger will come, and something different will happen inside you. Instead of the old flood, the familiar surge of anxiety or anger or the desperate need to fix and control, there will be a pause. A breath. A fraction of space between the trigger and your response that was not there before. And in that space, there is room for something truer than the old reaction. There is room for discernment. There is room for a choice that comes not from the wound but from the solid ground of who you are becoming in me. You will also notice changes in how you communicate. You will find yourself speaking less. Not because you have become withdrawn or disengaged, but because you are learning to discern before you speak. The words that once rushed out of you, the reactive words, the defensive words, the words spoken in haste from a place of hurt or fear, those words will slow. And the words that do come out, fewer, more deliberate, more considered, will carry a weight they did not carry before. Not because you have practiced being more articulate, but because what you are speaking from has changed. There is a depth beneath your words now. A groundedness. A quality that people sense even if they cannot name it. And the way you love will change too. You will find that your love, the way you connect with others, the way you invest in relationships, is becoming less driven by need and more driven by genuine care. Less shaped by the fear of what you might lose if you do not hold on tightly enough. Less colored by the desperation of someone who needs to be needed. You will begin to love with clarity. Knowing what to hold and what to release. Knowing what is genuinely from me and what is merely the echo of old patterns seeking to perpetuate themselves. Knowing the difference between a relationship that carries life and one that, however comfortable, is slowly draining it. The Lord gives strength to His people. The Lord blesses His people with peace. Psalm 29 verse 11. That peace, the peace that produces this clarity, this groundedness, this quality of love that knows itself, does not arrive after the storm has passed. It stands within the storm. It is present in the difficult conversation. It is present in the unresolved situation. It is present in the moment of greatest uncertainty. Because it does not come from the circumstances being resolved. It comes from me. And I am always present. Now I want to speak to you about something practical. Because the elevation I am leading you into is not only spiritual in some abstract sense, it shows itself in very concrete, very tangible ways in the ordinary moments of your daily life. And I want you to know what to look for so that you can recognize it and cooperate with it rather than unknowingly resisting it. The first practical change is this: before you make decisions, before you respond to situations, before you react to what people say or do, you will begin to turn inward first. Not as a delay tactic. Not as a way of avoiding engagement. But as an act of alignment. As a choosing, in that fraction of a moment before action, to check in with me rather than simply defaulting to the first thing that rises from the old reactive patterns. I have formed within you an inner chamber. A place of stillness that exists beneath all the noise, beneath the demands of the day, beneath the pressures of other people's expectations, beneath the endless movement of life. And in that inner chamber, I dwell. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46 verse 10. Each time you return to that stillness, each time you make the choice to turn inward before turning outward, something clarifying happens. My voice becomes clearer than your emotions. My guidance becomes more distinct than your natural reactions. What is true becomes more accessible than what is merely reactive. And from that place, from that quiet interior knowing, your choices begin to change. They are no longer reflexive. They are guided. They are no longer defensive. They are discerning. They are no longer driven by the panic of someone who feels out of control. They are grounded in the stability of someone who knows where they stand and who they stand with. In practical terms, this looks like this: a situation arises that would once have caused you to react immediately from hurt or fear. And instead, before the old response has time to fully form, you pause. You breathe. You turn inward for just a moment. And in that moment of turning inward, you hear something deeper than the noise of the situation. Something quiet and steady and absolutely certain. I am here. And from that point, everything changes. The response that comes out of you is not the old response. It is something truer, something cleaner, something that comes from a place within you that is no longer governed by the wound. And the people around you may notice, even if they cannot articulate what is different. They will sense that you are responding from a different place. That there is a groundedness in you that was not there before. A quality of presence that makes the space around you feel safer, calmer, less reactive. This is what I mean by inner elevation. Not an external upgrading of your life circumstances. not the arrival of everything you have been waiting for, but a repositioning of the very place you live from within yourself. A shift in the ground floor of your interior life. From the reactive, fear-driven, wound-governed responses of the old self to the discerning, grounded, presence-oriented responses of the new creation you are becoming. And here is what is most important about this elevation: no one can take it from you. The things the world gives, status, approval, security, recognition, all of those can be removed. All of those exist at the mercy of other people's choices and the shifting conditions of external circumstances. But what I am building within you does not exist in the hands of others. It exists in me. It is established in the unchanging ground of my presence within you. And what is established in me cannot be shaken by what operates outside of me. You are being repositioned. From the outside in to the inside out. From reaction to presence. From wound-driven to truth-driven. From the desperate searching of someone who does not know where they belong to the quiet confidence of someone who has found the only ground that does not move. You are not merely being improved. You are not simply becoming a better version of your old self. You are being made new. And the new creation that is emerging through this process, the one who breathes differently, loves differently, responds differently, exists differently, that is not a stranger. That is the truest version of you that has ever existed. The one I always saw. The one I formed before you were born. The one that all the fear and all the walls and all the years of learning to survive were obscuring, not destroying, never destroying, but hiding. I am bringing you back to yourself. And in doing so, I am bringing you home.